In this video, I want to show you how you can use the Superior Drummer 3 mix presets as a starting point to create brand new drum mixes. Within the core library of Superior Drummer 3, there are many presets that you can choose to load predefined drum configurations and mixer effects chains. You can load any of these presets as they are and use that as your drum mix. However, today I want to show you how you can use these presets as a starting point to spark creativity and create brand new drum mixes. So let's jump back to the default kit. So this is the kit that Superior Drummer opens with. You can see there's nothing going on in the mixer, no effects. And I'm going to go to the pop rock category and choose this Club Kit Basic preset. You can see it loads the kit configuration and the mixer. And let's go ahead and take a listen to what this sounds like. So again, we have a great sounding kit already, but what I want to show you is how you can use this preset as a starting point to eventually create a kit that sounds like this. So I'll show you how we get there. Once again, I'll load the Club Kit Basic preset. And the first thing I will do is make some drum selection changes. We're going to keep the same bass drum, but let's select a different snare drum. We're going to choose the Ludwig Black Beauty. Now, there's two varieties of these in this library. We're going to choose the 1920s version. So the classic Ludwig Black Beauty. And then for the toms, I want a bit of a lower, bigger tom sound. And I really like the toms in the Premier kit. So we'll go ahead and load those. And I'm actually going to load the lower configuration. So rack tom 2, floor tom 2. So we will remove the current tom selections. And then select the position for the second rack tom. We'll choose the Premier. Same with the floor tom. Now this is a 16 by 18 bass drum, and since we have bigger toms now, I want to lower the pitch of the bass drum as well, just to kind of match that lower sound. We'll go over to the tuning algorithm with the bass drum selected, we'll bring that down, and we'll use the processed higher quality algorithm. Now let's jump over to the mixer, and notice in the mixer we have rack tom 1 and floor tom 1 showing, because that is what was originally in the preset. So let's click on Edit Visibility, and we are going to go ahead and hide rack tom 1, floor tom 1, and unhide rack tom 2 and floor tom 2. Also note that we have effects from the preset that are on rack tom 1 and floor tom 1, so we're going to move those over. Let's listen to the floor tom now. I'll go back and select it. Come back to the mixer, clicking on Control Option on my Mac. So now we have a velocity pad that we can use here. So I'm going to move the effects over. I can also Option or Alt click as well to copy. It won't matter in this case because we're not going to use rack tom 1. So we'll go ahead and hide those toms. And now we have rack tom 2, floor tom 2 with the effects. And again, these are coming from the preset. I'm going to leave them just as they are. Got some EQ and compression going on. Now, I also want to add a little bit more ambience to this mix. So let's go back to the Edit Visibility, and I want to load the ambient near channel. You can see it's hidden right now, so we'll unhide it. And none of the samples are loaded for that channel in this preset. So I'm going to load all of them by clicking on this drop-down bleed option icon and say Enable Bleed from all instruments. Now, a little tip, if you forget to unhide a channel that is active, that has active sounds, and you click on Edit Visibility, a little green dot will appear over here right next to the Edit Visibility button, and you can make everything visible that is active that is not currently visible. So that's another great way to make all of your active channels visible in the mixer. Now I'm going to grab both the ambient ribbon and ambient near, and we're just going to boost it up a couple dB just so we can get a little bit more room sound, and those are both routed to the ambience bus. Let's take a listen to that. At this point, I'm going to leave all of the actual individual mic channels alone, and we're going to jump to the bus section. I want to do a bit of EQ and compression on the kick drum. I want to beef up the kick drum and actually beef up the toms a bit more as well. So this is the EQ curve for the kick bus channel from the preset. So I'm going to take this boost at about 3K. I'm going to bump it up to about 4.5 or 5K to get a little more batter click attack, and we'll boost the gain on that just a bit. Let's bring up the sample pad for the kick drum. And I want to do a little bit of cleanup around the 200 hertz range. So let's actually boost that, and we'll do a steep Q. So we'll really filter that frequency. So it's a little bit boxy sounding there, so I'm going to actually pull that down several dB, but again, we have a relatively steep Q, so it's a narrower bandwidth, so it won't affect as much of the frequency range. And then I want to boost some of the low end. Now, anywhere between 60 and 80 hertz, depending on the pitch of your bass drum, is a good range. We'll do about 75. We'll just boost a couple dB. And another tip is if you shift, click, and move these dials, you'll get a little bit more fine-tune adjustment. Now, because we're doing a boost here, I do want to roll off a little bit of the low end. So let's go to about 30 hertz. We'll add another point, and we'll click on the roll-off high-pass filter option, and we're going to bring down the slope so that we get a fairly drastic roll-off. So we're doing a boost, but then we're getting rid of the really low-end information just so it's not in the way. Now we'll enhance the kick drum sound even more with the compressor. We have a lot of different compressors we can choose from. I'm just going to choose this first one here, classic compressor. We'll do a 3-to-1 ratio, and we'll do a little bit of a slower attack and a faster release, so we're not compressing and taking away any of the transients. Let's go ahead and play the track. I'll solo the bass drum, and we'll bring the threshold down so we're getting a few dB of compression. Two to 3 dB of compression, so I'm going to push the makeup gain to compensate. So you can hear we get a nice full bass drum sound with that EQ and compression, which will translate well into this mix. Now we may need to make some adjustments to the actual volume of the bus channels, but we'll do that later. Next, I want to enhance the toms. So if we click on the tom channel, a great trick to add both volume and depth to any bus channel, but it works really well on tom channels, is to add the tape simulator. I'm going to leave this at default settings, except we'll just bring the bias down. Turning up the bias, you almost get more of a compressed sound, and turning down the bias, you retain more of the transients, which is what I want. So already a fuller tom sound. Let's add some EQ as well. And here we're just going to do a little bit of a hi-fi EQ move. Boost the high end again around 5K, about 3 dB. Let's boost the low end. The range is going to depend on the pitch of the drum. We'll do it at about a little over 100, maybe 100 to 120 hertz. And we'll boost about 3 dB there as well. And then I like to clean up some of the mid frequencies where the kick drum has some boxy frequencies around 200. Toms sometimes are a bit higher. Floor tom could be within the range of the kick drum, but this is the tom bus, so we're going to do a bit higher, maybe around 600 to 800 hertz. And let's actually hear what that sounds like. We'll turn the Q up just to hear that range. We'll go ahead and pull some of that out. Not much, maybe a dB or so. We're going to reset the Q. That's an Alt Option click. And let's actually bring the gain back up. So we're just taking maybe a 1 to 2 dB. And again, that's just a little bit of cleanup work, and we're enhancing the high end and low end of the tom bus. Let's move on to the ambience channel. Now we already boosted the ambience channels a bit, so the ambient ribbon that was already there in the preset, we added the ambient near. Now I'm gonna add some compression, which is really gonna exaggerate the room sound. Let's take a listen as it stands now. So for the ambience channel, I want to add a compressor. We'll use this compressor limiter. It's a bit of a faster compressor. We can get more of an aggressive sound out of it. So we're really going to crank up the ratio about 7 or 8 to 1. We'll leave the attack and release at default. And let's bring the threshold to a point where we're getting quite a bit of gain reduction. And then we'll use the makeup gain to push it back up. Let me solo the ambience channel. Okay, so really exaggerating the compression on the ambience channel, and there was a lot of ambient near, so I went ahead and brought that down, balanced those out a little bit, but you can still tell that the ambience near is in there. In fact, if we play this again, it is already making a big difference here. Now, let's see where we're at with the level. We may adjust the ambience channel to bring it up in the bus channel a bit more. Let's hear what it sounds like in context with the entire mix. So I like it actually a bit louder, so we're really compressing the ambience channel. We're turning up the ambience bus, so we're getting even more ambience. Notice though with that ride cymbal, that really exaggerates the ride and actually the hi-hat as well. So I'm going to bring those down, but I like the sound of what that's doing to the drums. So we'll go to the level with the ride selected. Gonna bring that down quite a bit, negative 3.5 dB. The hi-hat, let's just bring that down 1 dB. So that'll help balance those cymbals a bit, but we can still retain those really big drum sounds with that compressed ambience channel. Let's move on to the reverb channel. And if we look at the snare bus sends, you can see we're sending to the reverb bus. If I solo this, you'll hear the snare hitting this room reverb plugin. Now we'll make some adjustments here in a moment, but I'm going to turn down this reverb send and turn up the reverb bus channel. What that allows me to do is have a little more leverage with turning up or down the send, because right now it's maxed. So I may want to adjust the relative mix of other instruments, which we're going to do. We're going to add kick drum in here as well. So let's bring this down about -6, and I want to add a bus send for the kick drum to the reverb channel as well. And we will bring that down. We'll actually go a bit lower than the snare drum. So now they're both sending to this reverb channel. But now the reverb channel's softer, so let's bump that up. And again, we're going for a nice big sound here, so I'm not going to be afraid to bump up the reverb channel a bit. Now, if the kick drum is too much, you're hearing too much of that room reverb, you can always turn down the bus send. We're not going to put it on the toms, although you could. In fact, if we do, you'll hear what that sounds like, but I think that's going to be a bit much, and we already have an ambient of enough tom sound going through the compressed ambience channel. So you could sneak that into the mix. I'll leave it there in case we ever want to turn that on. but we'll keep it off for now. So we only have bus sends to the reverb channel from the kick and snare. Now let's solo the reverb bus channel, and let's just take a look at some of these settings. Now we could leave these as is, but I like to play around with the reverb and see what kind of variation we can get here. I want to increase the reverb time. We'll leave the decay and pre-delay as it is, and then we will adjust the diffusion and the damping, which will adjust the sound as well. Now, I made some very subjective changes here in the room reverb, and you could certainly run with the default settings, but it's nice to go in, change the reverb time. We could adjust the decay, pre-delay if we wanted. I really like playing around with the diffusion. You notice that that changes the sound. You almost get more of a slapback by turning the percentage down. And then we can change the damping, the frequency range that the reverb is affecting as well. So at this point, I feel like we have a pretty good mix. I want to make some additional relative adjustments to the bus channels, the bus levels, and then we'll tie everything together with subtle compression on the main output. So let's go ahead and bring down the kick drum channel a little bit since we did some boosting here. I just don't want that to get in the way too much. I feel like the snare drum is a bit loud as well. Let's bring that down a dB. And again, because of the enhancement we did to the tom bus, let's go ahead and bring that down a little bit as well. So we still get the bigger low-end sound of the tape simulator and the EQ changes we made, but we're just going to bring the relative level down related to the other channels. And finally, let's add some compression on the main output channel. Now here we'll want to be subtle because we're affecting everything, and the classic compressor is a great way to do that because it's a little more of a transparent compressor. We can use it to glue everything together. So the settings we'll go for is 2-to-1 ratio, and I want a slower attack again. I don't want to eat up any of the transients, faster release. And I'm going to use this sidechain function, so lower frequencies tend to hit the compressor, so it will cause the compressor to activate and compress the signal. I don't want some of those lower frequencies, especially coming from the kick and toms, to activate the compressor, so I'm going to use just a bit of sidechain high-pass filter. So we're going up to about 60 hertz, so it's not much, but that way the low frequencies don't affect the compressor as much, so we're mainly going to be compressing primarily the snare and some of those higher frequencies. Now what I'm going to do here is actually compress a fair amount, and then we will use the mix knob to dial it back. So we're going to do what's called parallel compression all within this classic compressor. So we'll have the dry signal mixed with this compression, and it's a great way to glue everything together once again. Now we're doing about 4 to 6 dB of compression. To me, I think that's a bit much, so let's pull down the mix knob. We'll go to about 45%. If I wasn't using the mix knob, I'd do about maybe 1 or 2 dB of compression at this point. But because we're doing about 4 to 6, we'll dial back the mix knob again, doing parallel compression, and that will help glue everything together. Don't forget, when you make these mix changes, to save your presets. You can do so within the drop-down menu. Go to Save As, and you can name your preset, so that way you can recall it at any time. And there we go. We started with the Club Kit Basic Mix preset within Superior Drummer 3, made some instrument adjustments along with some pitch and level adjustments, and then we enhanced what was already in the mixer. And you can see we get a very different sound than we had before. And what you can hopefully see is how you can use these built-in mix presets as starting points to get creative and produce new mixes, all within Superior Drummer 3. This is only one of any direction you could have gone with this Club Kit Basic preset, so I would encourage you to start with any of the presets within Superior Drummer 3 and start experimenting, start seeing what kinds of new drum sounds and drum mixes you can come up with. It's a great way to learn from what the producers who created these mixes have already done, and also utilize your own mixing perspective to take the mix preset in a whole new direction.